Hey church, think of your favorite team, whether that's football, basketball, whatever sports team that may be. Think of the team. Now, think of the court or the field that they play on. Imagine how different the game would be if the field or the court was altered in some way. For example, imagine that the three-point line on a basketball court was moved further back or closer, and how drastically that would change the game and the number of points scored. Think about a football field, and what if it was 150 yards long instead of just 100 yards, or an additional 20 yards wider? The field or the court that the game is played on directly impacts how the game is played, which leads me really to the next hermeneutical principle that we must abide by when we're trying to find the author's intended meaning. And that is check the court, or at least what I'm calling check the court, okay? It's the rule that we must abide by when trying to get back to the aim of that particular passage, scripture, book, whatever it is. And so we need to know what the literary style or the court is that the author is employing so that we can get an accurate interpretation of what he's trying to tell us. Now, the literary styles basically break down into two major categories. You've got prose, which makes up about 2/3 of the Bible, and then you've got poetry, which is the other third. Now, the prose breaks down into two further categories called narration, which is about 44% of the entire Bible, and then the other would be discourse. Okay, in narration, you would find things like history, you would find things like chronology, biography, all those kinds of different writing styles. In prose discourse, you would find the things that are more like Paul's letters, okay, where you're conveying a very specific message and building an argument for that particular message. And so here you would find things like laws, the laws of the Old Testament, of the New Testament. You'd find some wisdom literature. You would find the letters, as I've already mentioned. All right, so that's kind of what you would find in the discourse. Now, in the poetry, you're going to find some songs. You're going to find some more wisdom literature like Ecclesiastes or something along those lines. And then you would also find prophecy, okay? And so the world of the Bible kind of breaks up into those two major categories, prose and poetry. And that's really what I want to focus on today. When we're checking the court, are we in prose or are we in poetry? And sometimes it's not very clear as to which one. So what we're going to do is we're going to read through Judges chapter 4 and 5, just parts of those, okay? Because what happens here in the story, as happens often in the early books of the Bible, is you get a long part of narration, and then all of a sudden there's a chapter of poetry that kind of recaptures or retells the story. Alright, so in Judges chapter 4, we find Deborah is the representative of God. And she sends a man named Barak to go deal with an evil king of the Canaanites named Jabin. And his main general named Sisera. But Barak was afraid to go, and so he asks Deborah to come with him. And because of that, Deborah says that this enemy will not be given over into his hands, but will rather fall at the feet of a woman. Okay, which is a very interesting, compelling story. All right, so that's where we're going to pick up in Judges chapter 4. We'll read verses 16 through 24, and this is the story. Kind of in the middle of battle, Barak pursued the chariots and army as far as Harosheth Hagoyim. All the troops of Sisera fell by sword, not a man was left. Sisera, however, fled, this is the enemy, you remember, he fled on foot to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, because there were friendly relations between Jabin, king of Hazor, and the clan of Heber the Kenite. Jael went out to meet Sisera. All right, so this woman goes out and meets this commander, this general who's running, and said to him, "Come, my lord, come right in. Don't be afraid." So he entered her tent, and she put a covering over him. "I'm thirsty," he said. "Please give me some water." She opened a skin of milk and gave him a drink and covered him up. "Stand in the doorway of the tent," he told her. "If someone comes by and asks you, 'Is anyone here?' say no." But Jael, Heber's wife, picked up a tent peg and a hammer and went quietly to him while he lay fast asleep, exhausted. She drove the peg through his temple into the ground, and he died. Now Barak came by in pursuit of Sisera, and Jael went out to meet him. "Come," she said, "I will show you the man you're looking for." So he went in with her, and there lay Sisera, with the tent peg through his temple, dead. On that day God subdued Jabin, the Canaanite king, before the Israelites, and the hand of the Israelites grew stronger and stronger against Jabin, the Canaanite king, until they destroyed him. Okay, so now we're going to move over just one chapter, to chapter 5, and we'll start in verse 19, and it's going to retell a lot of the same story. And I want us to notice the differences in the way it tells the story. Verse 19, "Kings came, they fought. The kings of Canaan fought at Tanash by the waters of Megiddo. But they carried off no silver, no plunder. From the heavens the stars fought. From their courses they fought against Sisera. The river Kishon swept them away, the age-old river, the river Kishon. March on, my soul, be strong." Then thundered the horses' hooves, galloping, galloping, go his mighty steeds. "Curse Meroz," said the angel of the Lord. "Curse its people bitterly, because they did not come to help the Lord against the mighty. Most blessed of women be Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite. Most blessed of tent-dwelling women. He asked for water, and she gave him milk. And a bowl fit for nobles, she brought him curdled milk. Her hand reached for the tent peg, her right hand for the workman's hammer. She struck Sisera, she crushed his head, she shattered and pierced his temple. At her feet he sank, he fell, there he lay. At her feet he sank, he fell, where he sank, there he fell dead. Through the window peered Sisera's mother. Behind the lattice she cried out, "Why is his chariot so long in coming? Why is the clatter of his chariots delayed?" The wisest of her ladies answered her. Indeed, she keeps saying to herself, "Are they not finding and dividing the spoils, a girl or two for each man? Colorful garments as plunder for Sisera, colorful garments embroidered, highly embroidered garments for my neck, all this as plunder?" So may all your enemies perish, O Lord, but may they who love you be like the sun. When it rises in its strength, then the land had peace 40 years. Now, when we compare these two versions of the story, we notice some differences. The poetry has some extensive repetition of words and word order, and we call that parallelism. The poetry focuses on the praise of Jael for her actions in killing Sisera. The prose, however, is more concerned about the narration and the dialogue. The poem is more emotional as the words of Sisera's mother is lamenting over the fact that he has not returned from battle with the spoils of war. There are also details that are embellished in the poetry. For example, in the narration in chapter 4, we're told that Jael simply gave him milk. But the poem tells us it was curdled milk. Now, the poem lacks a number of details that the story narration in the chapter earlier tells us, but it also shows us what's going on beyond the story of what's simply happening. It reveals what's happening in the heavens as it talks about the stars of heavens raging war against Sisera, as well as the angel of the Lord makes an appearance and gives a curse. And then, of course, there's the language that drives the reader's mind back to earlier stories that they've read already or heard already, like the washing away of the enemy's chariots by the Kishon River, which should draw the reader back to the Exodus, when God let down the waters of the Red Sea and washed the chariots of Pharaoh away. And so the poem allows you to bring the emotion and the freedom from that particular story into this context. Both prose and poetry are important. And over the next couple weeks, we're going to look a little bit closer at some of the more definitive differences between the two, and how we can best read them and interpret the different writing styles of the Bible. But until then, grace and peace.